You know, I thought I was done with Spider-Man, but it seems like I got one more idea ready for you. Hello everybody and welcome back to Pitch This here on the MrEliMac channel. I'm your host, MrEliMac. And before I get into the pitch, I hope you all hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. That way you can be up to date with all the videos I have here on the channel. And also hit the notification bell, that way you can be notified whenever a new video like this comes your way. But with that out of the way, look. This past August, I had an entire month dedicated to Spider-Man. I pitched multiple different Spider-Man videos and different movies that I think would be cool. Like, one of them was what I would do with the fourth Spider-Man movie. One of them was what I would do to continue on the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, but more in the sense of having Miles take up the mantle. The next one was another one was the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, but more of having his daughter be the main character. And so those were a lot of ideas that I had throughout this past August in terms of movies. However, what I never told you all was that I had a Spider-Man TV show idea, but it was more of a hypothetical alternate universe. For example, a major television show that was a big mainstay staple in the superhero genre and medium was the show of Smallville, starring Tom Welling, Kristen Cruick, and Michael Rosenbaum. That was a popular show for all superhero comic book nerds like myself. I thought, what if instead of a Smallville TV show, I got a Spider-Man TV show instead? So what if Sony said, hey, let's not try to make a Spider-Man movie. Let's not try to make this a big film franchise. What if instead we made it into a TV show and we debuted it on the WB network, which would later convert over to the CW. And so this is sort of what the pitch is. This is the what if instead of Smallville, it was Spider-Man instead. And am I saying this as I'm going to take all the actors from Smallville and put them in this role and Spider-Man characters? No, I'm not doing that at all. There are some characters or some actors from the aforementioned Smallville show that were actors in the original Smallville show, but I'm only going to be mentioning a few of them because those are the only ones that I've sort of have cast out in the ideas. So, without further ado, let's get into the movie pitch for The Amazing Spider-Man TV show. So first off, I wanted to go ahead and say this. I am following the format of 10 seasons. The Spider-Man show will have 10 seasons, each of them debuting in 2001, ending in 2011, all of them having 10 episodes, and I even have it formatted to where they're each going to have the same length of the Smallville show. So season 1 of Smallville was 21 episodes, so season 1 of The Amazing Spider-Man show is going to be 21 episodes. And I bet you're all wondering, why am I calling it The Amazing Spider-Man instead of just Spider-Man? Well, I'm someone that very much likes having the actual title of a comic book be sort of like the title of the movie. Like, for example, if Iron Man would have came out and I would have been in charge of it, I would have called it The Invincible Iron Man instead of just Iron Man. For Thor, I would have called it The Mighty Thor. Like, I'm that person. I very much like adding the adjectives to the characters because I think that very much works with the characters, and I think that's pretty neat, in my opinion. I would very much like to see like that on screen. Hence why when they debuted when the Andrew Garfield movie came out as The Amazing Spider-Man, I was like, ha! They did it. They actually are adapting the Spider-Man comic title. And so that's what I'm doing here. It is titled The Amazing Spider-Man. And I'm going to go ahead and just say some of the casting suggestions that I have. I'm only going to do like the main 4. And when I say the main 4, I mean Spider-Man, Harry Osborn, Gwen Stacy, and Mary Jane. And for Spider-Man, I have Adam Brody. I think Adam Brody would make a great early 2000s Spider-Man, especially TV Spider-Man. Also, every single time I look back at his time on the OC and you see him do the Spider-Man thing, I was very much like, he would make a good Spider-Man. And he has that sort of energy where, especially in the early 2000s, he has that energy where you could believe him as Spider-Man. For Harry Osborn, I cast Ian Somerhalder. You may know him from shows like The Vampire Diaries. He was in season 3 of Smallville. And I was looking up because I was curious how old he was in the early 2000s, and he was in his early 20s, similar to Adam Brody. Like, a majority of the cast are in their early 20s, so I really wanted that to be the main thing instead of cast 30-year-olds to play high schoolers. Like, no, I'm at least wanting to cast early 20-year-olds, so like late teens, as these characters, these high school characters. So Ian Somerhalder is going to be playing Harry, who I sort of have as the rich guy. He's a little bit of a douche, but he's actually a very good friend to Peter. Like, he's not a bully. He's an outsider because he's rich and he has all the money, and so that's how he sort of relates to Peter, who is an outsider because he's nerdy and such like that. And that's sort of the relationship between them as a friendship, because that's how I want that to work, where I want them to both be outsiders of sorts, and so that's how they naturally become friends with each other, even though if you were to just look at them, they don't seem like they would be best friends, and that's sort of how I want it to be. They don't look like they could be best friends, but when you hear both of their backstories, it makes sense why they're best friends. For Gwen Stacy, I went into the One Tree Hill pool, and I am casting Bethany Joy Lenz, who played Haley Scott in One Tree Hill. She's sort of like, her character in that, she was like sort of the friend of Chad Michael Murray's character, Lucas Scott, and she was sort of like the brainy girl who got with Nathan Scott, who in the One Tree Hill was all over the place. Let's just say this: she was the best friend to the main character, who got together with the main character's brother, who was originally his enemy, but then she was sort of the one that brought the brother character of the main character, brought him to the light side and sort of showed the darkness that was around him. And so yeah, that was her character. She was the smart girl, and she was the one that was very much one of my favorite characters, honestly, in One Tree Hill. And I thought because of that, like, especially that role by itself, I think she very much could play a Gwen Stacy character. Since she's already played, like, a smart character in One Tree Hill, I feel like easily, like, show that she could do that in Gwen Stacy. Also, though in the One Tree Hill show, she was brunette for a majority of the time, I believe she's naturally a blonde. So having her use her natural hair color would be nice to see. And now this one, Mary Jane was sort of one that I didn't cast early on, but then after thinking about it, I sort of found the person who I thought would be perfect for the role, and it is another One Tree Hill character. I really love One Tree Hill. I don't care what people say, I love the show One Tree Hill. And so, I'm stealing from that show, because I don't like the creator of the show, because he's really horrible human being. If you want to learn more of the backstory between how he is in real life, you can just go read about that, but I really like the cast of One Tree Hill. And so for the Mary Jane character, I'm casting Sophia Bush as Mary Jane Watson, who played Brooke Davis in One Tree Hill, and Brooke Davis in the One Tree Hill show was also sort of the party girl who has a tragic past. And look, you can sort of see Sophia Bush has played a Mary Jane character in Brooke Davis, and so I'm continuing that, hard for words, I'm continuing that with this, and very much continuing on with the character of, she's the party girl on the outside, but on the inside, but in real life, like behind closed doors, she has a tragic past, and that's sort of her character. And yeah, those are sort of the four main characters. I'll mention each of the antagonists that I have. I know I have the list, like some of the castings that I have on my phone on a Google Doc, so I will bring that up. But as of right now, I just wanted to focus on those four, because those are the four sort of major pillars, and there are certain seasons that have major moments, but I'm mainly going to mention sort of like the big bads, because the big bads of the show sort of tell the story of each season, and so that's really what I'm going to be talking about. So for season 1 through 4, which I am very much using as the high school years of Spider-Man, like Peter Parker would get bitten by the spider freshman year, and then seasons 1 through 4 would happen where season 1's freshman, season 2 sophomore, season 3 junior, Season 4 senior. I want it to go that way. I know that's again, Smallville did that, and I'm continuing with that model. And we would have the same main antagonist for seasons 1 through 4. And that main antagonist would be Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin. And the story behind that would be the Kingpin is sort of Peter's first big bad guy because he's trying to beat a mob boss. And so throughout the first 4 seasons, it's Peter going in over his head. In season 1, it's him learning about the Kingpin and him just taking out smaller criminals, just mobsters and gangsters and characters like that, who really aren't superpowered. There would be a few episodes where we would see superpowered characters, like we would see Electro in season 1, we would see Sandman in season 1, we would see a lot of the certain Rogues Gallery characters in season 1, not all of them, but sort of like some of the major players that would play major players in the future, they would be introduced in season 1. That way we could sort of lay the seeds and sort of lay down the groundwork of, hey, this is a major thing that's happening. This is a major development for his character. But ultimately, the big bad of season 1 and seasons 2, 3, and 4 would be the Kingpin. But in season 1, we would also be introduced to sort of a rival mobster, the big man, Frederick Foswell, and he would sort of be the one that would try to take down Kingpin in season 1, but season 1 would end with the Kingpin killing the big man, Frederick Foswell, and basically being like, hey, I'm in charge. You're not taking me down. And it would have Peter have his first big fight with Kingpin, but Kingpin would prove to be more powerful because, again, he's someone that's been doing this for a long time, so he knows how to fight people. And so seasons 2 would be sort of the same, sort of, not the exact same formula, but him still trying to get the Kingpin. And again, throughout a majority of the first 4 seasons, we'd get new characters created because Smallville created a lot of new characters as well, sort of their own original bad guys, and that's sort of what we would get for the first 4 seasons mainly, because a lot of the new bad guys would work for the Kingpin and no one else. And we would also have in season 4 would be the big one for the original first storyline, because season 4 would be the moment where Peter finally beats Kingpin, like uses his own knowledge and uses like his resources to finally take down the Kingpin, especially with incriminating evidence where, again, Captain George Stacy would be a major player in the first 4 seasons, but only in the first 4 because he would die in season 4 after Peter would try to stop Kingpin from killing George Stacy, but Kingpin would kill Captain George Stacy. And luckily for Peter, he would have a camera somewhere filming the entire thing. And so that's sort of how Kingpin gets thrown into jail by this incriminating and damning evidence of Kingpin killing a police officer. And that's sort of how Peter would use it. He would give it to the Daily Bugle, which at this time Peter would be working with the Daily Bugle, but the Daily Bugle wouldn't be a major important character or important location. It would be you would have recurring characters, like J. Jonah would be a recurring character, not a main character, same with Robbie and Betty. Sort of the high school stuff is more of the main focus of the first 4 seasons, like Flash Thompson is a main character, Liz Allen is a main character, and those sort of characters are sort of more focused on the first 4 seasons. And then we get into, and by the way, I just want to mention, my casting for Kingpin, I think, is great. He would be only a main character for the first 4 seasons. I'm looking at him as sort of like my Lionel Luthor character, where in the first 4 seasons of Smallville, Lionel Luthor was very much sort of the main antagonist. And then sort of once season 5 happened, that's when the transition to, hey, we're having different bad guys than Lionel. And that's sort of what he is here. And after he goes to jail, he's not seen from again. He would get out eventually, but immediately gets sent back because of shenanigans. But ultimately, the actor I have playing Kingpin is John Goodman. I think John Goodman would be a great Kingpin, especially in the early 2000s, allow him to stretch his muscles, because by this point, I think he'd mainly done comedy, so allowing him to do some drama while doing the comedy would be great. And so we get into season 5, which would be the lead up to the 100th episode, and the main antagonist of season 5 is Green Goblin. And so Norman Osborn, Green Goblin, who I have being played by Paul Johansson, who played Dan Scott in One Tree Hill, who's very much a Norman Osborn type character, bad human being, and does a lot of shady stuff in the background. And that's sort of his character in the show, and we would see him play the Norman and Green Goblin sides as well. And in episode 100, the episode 100 would be the tragic episode where we would get the death of Gwen Stacy. In season 5, episode 100, that was when we would get the death of Gwen Stacy. And then throughout the rest of the show, which I believe in Smallville, episode 100 happened around like mid-season, or it was the mid-season finale. And so throughout the rest of the season, it would be Peter trying to get the Green Goblin, try to kill him, but a lot of people in his life trying to convince him, hey, don't. And it's just going in through like his friends talking to Peter, saying like, hey, you shouldn't be going after revenge, like what happened to Gwen is horrible and this criminal should be stopped, but you shouldn't, because again, to them it's like, you can't actually fight him. Like, you shouldn't go out and try to get your revenge, because that's not you, and that's not what Gwen would want. Ultimately, we get into the season finale of the big fight between Norman and Peter is about to kill Norman, but he stops and he pulls back, and he doesn't do it because he's just hearing Gwen's voice in his head, telling him not to do it, and telling him that everything's gonna be okay. That's when we get the glider thing of, like, flipping around, moving out of the way, and then Norman gets killed in season 5, and I don't bring Norman back. Norman is done at season 5, and he's not coming back, because I think it would hurt the show if he were to be a multi-season, or at least as the Green Goblin, be a multi-season antagonist. No, he's only done for one season as the big bad. But then we move to season 6, and early season 6 is when he gets the black suit. And I know what you're all probably thinking, that we're gonna get Venom in season 6 as the main antagonist. I have introduced Eddie Brock. I would introduce Eddie Brock as a main character in season 5, but we're not getting Venom in season 6. Also, big note, after Norman dies, Harry would go away after season 5, and just to go find himself, because his dad died. And so that would be the exit of Harry for a little bit. But season 6 is dedicated to Peter versus the Sinister Six, and it would be Peter in the black suit fighting the Sinister Six. Did I do that on purpose? Yes, I did. And sort of the main antagonist, sure, it's the Sinister Six, but Doc Ock is really the main antagonist of this season. And to mention the cast of the Sinister Six, Doc Ock would be played by, where are you, I know you're here, Oliver Platt would be playing Doc Ock. And Vulture, I believe I have Vulture in here. If I don't, I'm ashamed of yes, Vulture would be played by Donald Sutherland, and again, this is fan casting that would probably never work. Electro would be played by Dash Mihawk, he played, not Tybalt, not Mercutio. He played Martin Soap in Punisher Warzone. That's the character that's the actor I'm casting in this show. He also played Arnold Flash in Gotham. So maybe you know him from those two properties. Playing Kraven the Hunter would be, where is he? I know he's here, Angus McFadden. Sandman would be played by, do I have Sandman as a recurring character? It makes sense. I don't. Sandman would be played by Joel Gresh. Again, some of these actors I don't know what they're from because they're mainly early 2000s TV actors. But yeah, Mysterio would be played by Timothy Omundson, because I love Timothy Omundson and I think he would be a great Mysterio. But yeah, that would sort of be the roster. It's the original roster of the Sinister Six, and they're the big bads. And ultimately, it would be the darkness of the black suit sort of going and using Peter to go after these criminals and trying to use his darkness against him. And this season also sort of has the introduction of Black Cat. I don't have her cast in my show yet. I wouldn't even know if I would have her as a main character. I probably would have her as a main character for at least for season 6 and season 7, but I just didn't write that down because I didn't even think about her at the moment. But now, like, thinking actually saying the idea, yep, she was in my head as for season 6, at least being introduced. So she would at least be a main character for season 6 and season 7 to sort of show the darkness that is in Peter. But then by the end of season 6, after he's beaten basically all of the Sinister Six and he's getting ready to kill Doc Ock, that's when he's sort of like, no, this isn't happening. I'm not killing this. And that's when he's realizing the symbiote is sort of using the darkness inside of him against Peter. And that's when he webs up the Sinister Six and brings them to the police. And that's when we get the iconic thing in the iconic scene in the bell tower, and he hits the bell tower and the symbiote suit falls off of him, and then it lands on Eddie Brock, because season 7 is when we would get Eddie Brock, the Venom season. And it would be Peter trying to maybe be more in a relationship with Felicia and Black Cat, but Felicia / Black Cat preferred him in the black suit, and so there's sort of like the separation right there. I'm not putting Peter with MJ yet, but right now it's very heavily focused on Peter trying to be with Felicia, but again, Felicia, because she's noticing that the darkness isn't really inside of him anymore, that's sort of the thing that's pulling her back away from him, because she preferred him being a little bit darker than the way he currently is and normally is. And Eddie Brock, I did not cast. I just realized that. Look, some of the, like, when I first put up a casting, when I was casting it, I was only casting for the first season, so I didn't really think about the next seasons afterwards. Honestly, if I were to do Eddie Brock Venom, I would cast Sam Witwer, because I very much love Sam Witwer in Smallville, and I love him as Darth Maul, so having him be Eddie would be great. Also, like, Venom, sort of a little bit, if you think about it, is sort of like Doomsday, and though I'm not pushing that to season 8 to mash with the Smallville thing, I'll just have, yeah, there you go. Sam Witwer is Venom in this, and it ends with Spider-Man beating Venom, ultimately. I may just have it to where he gets in a cell where he is separated from the symbiote, and the symbiote can't get back to him. I'll just say that's the ending. And then we get into season 8, which is the Hobgoblin season, where the entire mystery, because in this I already have Ned Leeds be a major character from seasons 5 to 8. I have Betty Brant being a character from seasons 5 to 8. Roderick Kingsley's Hobgoblin is the main antagonist, and we get the mystery of who is the Hobgoblin. I have Jason Macendale, I have Ned Leeds, I have Roderick Kingsley, and I just have all these moments where the Hobgoblin is in the same room as all 3 of these men. And then we get the reveal of Roderick Kingsley had been using, or we get the reveal of Ned is Hobgoblin, and then we have the cops kill him at that moment, and then everyone's like, okay, Hobgoblin's gone. Then Hobgoblin reappears, and everyone's like, hold on, what is happening? And then in the sort of the penultimate episode of the finale, that's when we get the reveal of Roderick Kingsley has been Hobgoblin this entire time. I don't have Roderick Kingsley cast, so don't ask, because I don't want to do what I just did with Venom and just think of a casting on the spot. But that's sort of like the big thing in the penultimate episode, where it's like, oh no, Ned wasn't the Hobgoblin, Roderick Kingsley is. And then in the finale we get the Hobgoblin Peter fight, and sort of around this point, sort of after this battle, is sort of when we start getting the Peter MJ romance, like the end of season 8. And then we get into season 9, where it's split into 2 halves. It will make sense because I connect both of them, but they're split into 2 halves. The first half is the Clone Saga, because I really wanted to do the Clone Saga, and Miles Warren is a major supporting character starting in season 5, because I wanted to have him as a major supporting character because Professor stuff, and he might go away a little bit throughout seasons 6 and 7 and 8, but he's a major supporting character in seasons 5 and in season 9, because he's the main antagonist of the Clone Saga storyline, where we get the return of Bethany Joy Lenz as Gwen, we get multiple Adam Brodys as different Spider-Mans, but then Peter is easily able to stop all of it. Ben Reilly is there, but then he gets killed. Kane is there, but then he gets killed. I basically end the clones at the midpoint of the season, but then we get a little reveal at the end of the mid-season finale where the first clone that Miles made was actually from the blood of Peter when he was wearing the Venom symbiote. And then you sort of see the blood move by itself, and then in the second half, that's when we get Carnage, and that's when we get the return of Venom, and we see the way we get the Carnage symbiote onto Cletus Cassidy is that Cletus was one day trying to escape from Ravencroft, and he gets to where the main police was, and we get to the evidence locker. He's trying to get his stuff because he ran away from the asylum. He got to the police station, and he accidentally knocks down one of Miles' the vial with the Carnage symbiote in it. So he knocks it down, and it gets on him, and then he becomes Carnage, and then Maximum Carnage happens. And that's where Peter teams up with Felicia, Venom, maybe other heroes that I've introduced at this point, but I don't know exactly. Maybe Cardiac. You know, Cardiac's a Spider-Man character, so yeah, Cardiac is one of those characters, but I don't know all of them off the top of my head. Maybe Cloak and Dagger. Yeah, hero characters that would get introduced throughout the season, and then we have them go up against Carnage and maybe a few other symbiotes. Maybe one or two. Only two. Maybe just Scream. I don't know. I just know that we would end with Venom or Eddie Brock sacrificing himself and sort of killing Venom and Carnage in one go and sort of saving the day that way. And then we get into season 10, where we finally get a major episode in episode 200. And this entire time Aunt May has been here. She's been there from the beginning. She wasn't a major character sort of after the high school years, but she was still there on the opening credit sequence. But by this point we get to episode 200, and then Aunt May, and the entire episode 200, by the way, is just them on a bench talking to each other, and sort of Peter revealing to Aunt May that he's Spider-Man, and she's basically like, I know. And this is sort of where we get the big homecoming episode of, we see some of the greatest hits of Spider-Man, but then, and the only reason why we get the greatest hits is because Peter is trying to tell some moments, and we even see some stories that we never actually saw, like, oh yeah, there was one time I fought this guy, he was a hypnotist, and he was a big fan of disco music, he was a hypno hustler, and we probably get that little action scene. But ultimately this leads up to sort of Aunt May revealing to Peter that she's dying, and by the end of episode 200 we see the death of May Parker. And this is sort of an homage to issue 200 of The Amazing Spider-Man with the talk, and then Aunt May dying in that issue as well. And that's sort of what this episode of season 10, episode 200 of Spider-Man would symbolize, and sort of like the moving on from the older age of Spider-Man and the younger age of Spider-Man towards this new thing. Well, also in this season we would get a two-parter, because I don't want to do Morlun as a main antagonist of the season, so it's just a two-parter in season 10, get a big story out in two parts. But ultimately the main antagonist, and this character would have returned last season in season 9, Harry Osborn as the Green Goblin, getting his revenge, because during that time when he was gone, he learned that his dad was the Green Goblin, and he learned that Spider-Man killed his dad, the Green Goblin, and he learned that his friend Peter Parker was Spider-Man. And we sort of get an episode where it's just dedicated to Harry finding everything out, and sort of like a flashback scene of seeing all that. And then this season would sort of be like the full circle of the Goblin Peter storyline ending, and sort of ending everything, ending the story of Spider-Man in this one season, or at least this show. And we would get the final scene of Peter fighting Harry, and him basically being like, Harry, I didn't kill your dad. And then Harry's there, sort of like, and like I would have Paul Johansson return as well to be like a voice inside Harry's mind. And we get to a point where Harry is there, he is ready to kill Peter, and he's getting ready to kill him, and like he basically has him dead, but he doesn't. Instead he pulls away, and he's just like, no, and my friend, I can't do this. And that's when we hear like, "No! You have to do it. He killed me, Harry. You have to kill Peter Parker." And like, it's just the turmoil in his head, and it's basically sort of revealing that Norman is the Green Goblin personality in Harry's head. And so we get a moment where the Green Goblin side fully takes over Harry, and we get Harry about to kill Peter, or at least Green Goblin about to kill Peter, but Peter gets out of the way and is able to hold back more, and this would be like the 2-part finale. And then Harry does the same thing that his dad does, because Green Goblin doesn't know how to fix it. Gets the glider, and then Peter's able to get out of the way, and then the glider kills Harry. And Peter goes, and it's like the Green Goblin side of him dies first, and then it's just Peter saying goodbye to Harry. And Harry's just constantly like, "I'm sorry, Pete, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Peter's like, "Hey, you don't have to apologize. That wasn't you. That wasn't you." And Harry's like, "No, it was me. I wanted you dead, but I couldn't. Not at the end." And Peter's like, I know, buddy. Everything's gonna be okay." And Harry looks at him and is like, "Do you think he'll be able to see them again?" Pete's like, "Yeah. Say hi to Gwen." And then Harry smiles, and he dies. And that would be that story wrapped up. And then the show would end on a very happy note. It would end with the marriage of Mary Jane and Peter Parker, who had gotten together finally in season 8. And that would be where we would get the big moment of the show. And yeah, that's what I would do for a Spider-Man TV show, in sort of connection, sort of what if instead of Smallville it was Spider-Man. Like, that's what I would do. I think that the way I spread it out in those 10 seasons, I think that works. We would get a lot of new original villains for the show, but then we would also get like the classic villains. We would also get some of the really weird ones that no one even knows about. We'd get some of them. We'd get the living brain somewhere in this show. But yeah, those are just my thoughts. That's what I think would make a pretty good show, in my opinion. But that's just me. What are your thoughts on this Amazing Spider-Man TV show pitch? Whatever your thoughts, post them in the comments down below. Also, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. That way you can be up to date with all the videos I have here on the channel. Also, hit the notification bell, because you're going to want to hit the notification bell, because next week and all throughout the month of December, I'm going to be doing to end out the year, I want to do a series of what if, instead of the MCU, it was the DCCU. So I'm going to be taking the MCU and just replacing all those movies with DC movies. Like, instead of Iron Man, it's this movie instead. So I need you all to hit the notification bell. That way you can be notified when those videos goes up, because I've had this planned out for years, and I'm so ready to reveal it to the audience. But until next time, I've been Mr. EliMac, you've been the audience, and I hope you all have a great rest of the day.